In this lesson, I want to continue with the advanced trigonometry. In the last two videos, I spoke about cosine rule. There is also another one which called sine rule, which applies to any triangle, including the right angle triangle. In any triangle, let's say we have triangle ABC, angle A, angle B, and angle C. If I call the side opposite angle A with a little a, and little b for the side opposite angle B, that means A to C is B, and opposite angle C, little c, that means the length AB, we have A over sine of A. So length A over sine of angle A equals length B over sine of angle B is the same as little c, length C over sine of angle C. Or you can have this upside down. You can have sine of A over A equals sine of B over B equals sine of C over C. The question is, when do I use sine rule and when do I use cosine rule? My advice is always start with cosine rule. And if you don't have enough information, then it must be a sine rule. For example, I'll give you a question here. I'm told to find, for example, find this side. This side 8 meters, and this angle, say 57, and this angle 42 degrees. So first of all, I'm going to find side x using cosine rule. If you have watched my video on cosine rule, in order to find any side, you need the other two sides and the angle between. You see here, I don't have two given sides and the angle between. In this case, it can't be used by cosine rule. It has to be done sine rule. So in order to apply for the sine rule, I can either have that version or that version. If I'm looking for the side, it's easier to start with the version where the side is at the top. So in this case, I shall use that formula, which is A over sine of A equals B over sine of B. Of course, you don't need three ratios. You only need two of them. So x over sine of 42 is 8 over sine of 57. Side over the sine of opposite angle equals 8 over sine of 57. So the only unknown here is x. We have a fraction, x over sine 42 equals another fraction. To find x, obviously I need to multiply both sides by sine of 42. So I write again. What happens here? Sine of 42 from the numerator and denominator cancels, and x can be now found by entering this number. I write it again. 8 over sine of 57 times sine of 42. Of course, you will need calculator for this one. Make sure your calculator is in degree mode. So we have 8 over sine 57. Make sure you close the bracket times sine of 42. So that tells me that length x must be 6.38 meters to 2 decimal places. Let's have another example on sine rule, trying to find a side. The question I've got here, I'm given that this angle is 70 degrees, this angle is 80, this length here is 7 meters, and they've asked me to find this length here. As I mentioned before, I would try to do this using cosine rule. To find x, I need that side and the angle between. The angle between is not given but can be obtained. See, I can find this angle because angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees, 70 and 80, 150. So although it wasn't given, I obtained it anyway. Now try to use cosine rule. To find x, I would have x squared equals 7 squared plus this length squared, which I don't have. So cosine rule is not applicable. So let's go and use sine rule. And sine rule tells me x over sine of 30 would be 7 over sine of 80. Side over the sine of the angle opposite is the same ratio, 7 over sine of 80. Multiply both sides by sine of 30, so you have x equals 7 over sine of 80 times sine of 30. That can go straight into the calculator. So 7 over sine of 80 times sine of 30. And the answer is 3.55 meters. Again, to 2 decimal places. Now, I'm going to continue with sine rule questions again when I have to calculate the angle rather than the side. Let's look at this. So we have a triangle given. So this angle is 47. This angle to be found, this side and that side given, both in centimeters. Okay. To find an angle using cosine rule, I need all 3 sides. You really need to know the cosine rule very well before you come to the sine rule. The second video on cosine rule, it was when we had to obtain an angle and we needed all 3 sides. But we don't have all 3 sides, therefore cosine rule cannot be applicable here. So I'm going to use sine rule and using the version where the angle is at the top of the fraction. So I could say sine of x over the opposite side, which is 8, equals sine of 47 over side 10. In order to find x, I have to find sine of x first. And in order to find sine of x, I need to get rid of divide by 8 by multiplying both sides by 8. So just go through the procedure. Times by 8. And can see that 8 and that 8 cancels. So we have sine of x equals whatever that value is. So we have, let's use that value by entering in the calculator sine of 47. Make sure you close bracket again, over 10 times 8. This value is 0.58508299613. So x would be an angle in which its sine is this value. So if you remember, again, in simple trigonometry, when sine of an angle was given, to find the angle, we used to do the inverse value of this number. You can only enter the first 5 decimal places, or maximum the 6 decimal places. You don't need to enter all of them. Or you could just use the answer in the calculator, and when you press inverse, look here, I'm going to press inverse sine, and when the calculator is asking me to enter a number, I just put the answer which the calculator already had in the previous operation, and that tells me the angle which I was looking for is 35.8 degrees. Another example on sine rule when we have to find angles. Here in this question, I'm asked to find 2 angles, angle x and angle y. And I'm given 2 sides, 5 meters and 9 meters. But this angle, of course, is given 31.2 degrees. Right. Since I have got the side 9 degrees, I'm going to find the size of angle y first, because I cannot use x or find x because the side opposite is not known. So using sine rule, I can say sine of y over 9, sine of angle y over the opposite side equals sine of the given angle 31.2 over 5. Now multiply both sides by 9. Sine of y equals that fraction times 9. Because these are degrees. So I'm going to calculate what the value of sine of y is. So fraction at the top we have sine of 31.2 degrees over 5, the whole thing multiplied by 9. So the sine of that angle is 0.932448, etc. So to find angle y, we have to find inverse sine of that number, 0.932448. But I got the more accurate value on the calculator. So when I reverse sine, inverse sine, or shift sine. I won't be typing this again because calculator already got that in its memory. If I just press answer, it realizes I'm referring to the last result on the calculator. So that tells me the angle Y was 68.8 degrees. This concludes my lesson on sine rule. I explained to you the two possible cases where you're looking for the side of a triangle, or in these two cases when you're looking for the angle in a triangle. Again, when do I use sine rule? When do I use cosine rule? You always try with cosine rule. If it's applicable, then it's okay. Otherwise, if cosine rule doesn't work, we use sine rule. I hope you've enjoyed your lesson. Until next lesson, bye now.